What's up, guys? This is Kephas.
Welcome to SBA Spotlight. In these videos, I'll be covering how well the single button assistant performs for each spec, what it does well, where it falls short, and how to get the most out of it, especially if you're looking for a lower stress or more accessible way to play. So whether you're here to relax, overcome a limitation, or just see how far one button can take you, I've got you covered. Alright, so let's talk about the single button assistant and how it's working out with Unholy Death Knights. And to be honest, it's kind of a mixed bag. Unholy Death Knights have undergone a lot of changes since patch 11.2, so there's a lot to look at. Now, in my experience, I was getting about 70 to 75% of optimal DPS on a target dummy, which honestly, for melee classes, that's pretty standard. Unholy Death Knights are a fairly complicated class, managing multiple resources, cooldowns, and effects. The single button assistant runs a very standard priority list, just like it does with any other class. So it does fall short when managing some of these effects, but let's start off by taking a look at everything it covers. The short answer is that it covers just about everything. It'll summon your ghoul if it's not out already. It'll manage your festering wounds, cycling between Scourge Strike and Festering Strike. It uses Death and Decay whenever you're fighting multiple targets, and it will also switch between Death Coil and Epidemic. It prioritizes using Outbreak if Virulent Plague isn't on the target, and it will even use Soul Reaper when your target is below 35% health. On top of that, it does manage a couple of your offensive cooldowns, namely Apocalypse and Unholy Assault. Oddly, it does not use Summon Gargoyle, and I really don't know why. Fortunately, Summon Gargoyle is completely optional, so I would advise not taking it as a talent unless you want to use it on a separate button. The big cooldown that the single button assistant doesn't use is Army of the Dead or one of its counterparts, Raise Abomination or Legion of Souls. Again, this is a bit odd because the single button assistant does use Unholy Assault, and generally you want to line up Raise Abomination or Legion of Souls with Unholy Assault. So the best way to handle it is to simply use this ability on a separate button whenever the single button assistant is using Unholy Assault. So let's talk about the areas where the single button assistant falls short. The biggest thing that I noticed is that it does not handle Sand Lane well at all, so I would highly recommend against going down the Sand Lane hero path. The major issue is that the single button assistant will not prioritize using Vampiric Strike whenever it activates. This means that it will waste the chance to activate more Vampiric Strike procs, and that's a big damage loss. I've even seen it prioritize using Death Coil or Epidemic whenever Vampiric Strike is active, and that's especially frustrating because those are abilities that can activate Vampiric Strike in the first place. It seems like the single button assistant wants to prioritize using Death Coil or Epidemic whenever Sudden Doom procs, which is great for Sudden Doom but terrible for Vampiric Strike. I've also seen it use Festering Wounds before Vampiric Strike. I assume that it just doesn't account for Vampiric Strike at all and just uses Scourge Strike whenever you have Festering Wounds. So I recommend just sticking with Rider of the Apocalypse if you're going to use the single button assistant. Another thing that I noticed is that it will always prioritize using Outbreak if Virulent Plague isn't on the target, even if Apocalypse is available and ready to use. It actually seems to handle Apocalypse rather poorly. It doesn't save wounds for it until it's ready, and this can delay its use by a few seconds. And this messes up your offensive cooldown window by causing Apocalypse to become out of sync with Unholy Assault, which the single button assistant will always use whenever it's available. There are some other things that I could nitpick for sure, but those are my major gripes. The big takeaway here is that you are limited in what talent build you should use, namely you should stick with Rider of the Apocalypse and then just build according to the type of content you're doing. Aside from those hiccups though, the single button assistant does cover a lot of ground for what is a fairly complex class. It runs a fairly simplified version of your rotation with the exception of your main offensive cooldown. But as long as you can keep track of when this single button assistant uses Unholy Assault, it's pretty easy to keep up with even separately. And that's pretty much everything I've learned for now. But as always, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of the single button assistant and how is it working out for you so far? Let me know in the comments. But with all that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is Kephas. Until next time.